Welcome to r/RedditRevenge. This is a story of someone getting back at someone with revenge after being wronged. Thank you friends for subscribing to the channel, and for so many likes. The first story, D-Head screams at me over the phone. I turn on speakerphone so that both my bosses could hear him. The second story, I had an abusive stepmother who slandered my family and myself online among other things. Turned out she did the same thing to the company she works for and got fired. She is never going to have a job in her field again. The third story. I stopped working 100% because they refused to remove a terrible employee. Today's first story is Petty Officer's Petty Revenge. So I was once a petty officer in the US Navy. To note, my rank at the time of this pettiness was E5, and D-Head, DH, is one rank up, E6. My direct boss, Chief, at the time, was an E7. One of my assignments while I was active duty was to work directly under Chief as a glorified administrative assistant. Chief was in charge of several divisions, headed by their own chiefs, so mine has positional authority over them even though they share the same rank. I had worked for Chief for about a year, and we had a really good working relationship, plus he thought I was a genius. I formatted some Excel sheets that essentially did half his job for him. As part of my position, I had to regularly deal with the leaders of the other divisions and pass down instructions from my chief and other higher-ranking people. This makes for some unhappy people as the division leaders all outranked me by 1 to 2 ranks and did not like having a junior sailor telling them what to do, shooting the messenger and all that. In general though, the majority were nice and understood how things were. Plus, I'd go out of my way to help them with confusing paperwork and share my Excel formatting skills. Enter D-Head. DH. D-Head is one of those religious nuts that thinks he's better than everyone. He has a perpetual RBF and speaks to most people in a condescending manner, while looking down his nose at them. Yes, even people that outrank him, as he believes that he should have been promoted to their rank at this point in his career. He actually said this in the aftermath of this story. DH had a habit of trying to get me to do his paperwork. While I am typically happy to help, it is ultimately not my job. The divisions do their own paperwork, send them to me, I proofread them and either send it back with notes highlighting areas that need to be changed, or forward on to Chief if all is good. DH, however, would insist that it's my job, because if I'm the department's administrative assistant, said in a very condescending manner with air quotations. Side note, the job title really should have been department head's administrative assistant. It devolved to the point where DH was calling me saying SH like, I want to send so-and-so for XYZ training. I would then launch into my speech of what paperwork would need to be completed and such, only to be answered with things along the lines of, you mean I'm gonna have to do the paperwork? What use are you then? Why am I even calling you if you're not gonna do your job? Usually he gets the message that I'm not doing his paperwork for him though. One day he doesn't. He starts straight up ranting at me about how useless and disrespectful and insubordinate I am. How I'm probably blowing Chief and that's how I got my position, and ended with me needing to tell Chief to call him ASAP so that DH can tell him what a useless POS I was. It went on for quite some time. Partway through, I hit the speaker button on my phone, so that his rants come through loud and clear. Did I mention I shared a small office with Chief and Chief's boss? E8, pretty high in the enlisted food chain. I turn in my seat and both Chief and his boss poke their heads out of their cubicles, then slowly get up and walk over to my desk, as they realize what's going on. They let him finish ranting and hang up, then grill me about WTF just happened. I simply said DH is upset that I refused to do XYZ paperwork for him. I didn't know how skin that dark could look so red. Chief's boss told me very quietly to take the rest of the day off, and to please get DH's boss on the line before I go. The aftermath I pieced together from several people's accounts, DH got reamed. The screaming was allegedly so loud and extensive that the 2 officers across the hall had to stop by to make sure everything was okay. They also had to disperse the nosy crowd that gathered outside the office. DH's boss was told to get DH in line and educate him on how things were done around here. The entire department was given a firm lecture on my duties, i.e. I work for Chief, not them. The next morning, a lecture on appropriate communication skills was also given. If you want to talk to me, you effing come to me. You do not leave a message for me to call you back. If looks could kill, DH would have murdered me 1,000,000 times over for the rest of our time at that command. He still continued to be a P, but would never ask me to do anything or to help with anything. He would send a very nice, very junior girl to go through paperwork with me, until Chief put a stop to that, and he never called my phone ever again. The second story is Karma Comes for Evil Stepmother. Backstory. I'm a female in my mid-20s, currently quarantining with my dad. My parents got divorced when I was a baby, so my older sister and I spent most of our lives going between houses. I still do. My sister has her own life now. When I was 9, my mom remarried a wonderful guy who's been nothing but kind. My dad dated, but couldn't seem to find the right girl. My junior year in high school, he brought a new girl home for dinner to meet us. Let's call her Gothel, because she's a real witch. First impression, Gothel seemed to be a pleasant human being. She seemed nervous but made conversation with us, and did seem interested in getting to know my sister and I. Dinner goes well and Dad asks if it would be a good idea to have her around again. We say sure. She continues to stick around. We go shopping, out to lunch, usual girl bonding activities. She takes an interest in who I am and what I like doing. Everyone's happy. Close to the end of my senior year in high school, my dad pulls me aside and tells me that he wants to propose, and he wants to know what I think. I tell him that if he really loves her, and if she makes him happy, then by all means marry her. He proposes and she accepts. Everyone is happy for my dad and excited for the wedding, which was held in a beautiful botanic garden, attended by close family members. My sister and myself were the bridesmaids. Almost immediately after the wedding, things begin to go wrong. Suddenly Gothel is rude, angry, and irritable. Nothing we do seems to please her. We had a mini party at our house a couple days after the wedding where most of my dad's and Gothel's friends came to celebrate. I mingled and made small talk with people, but it got to be late in the evening and I was tired and wanted to go to bed, so I went to say goodnight to Dad and Gothel. She got peeved. Apparently me wanting to go to bed was a huge insult, and I could spare a few hours to celebrate their wedding. Lady, what do you think I've been doing for this past week? Something I found out later is that she got super drunk and was really mean to the bartender my dad had hired. And my dad had to pay her a lot more money to compensate for the horrible treatment she endured. Thus began a period of 2 years where Gothel would get extremely upset at us. We'd argue, go blow off some steam, come back all apologetic and promise to be better. Everything would be fine for a couple days before it all went to hell again. And these were big arguments. Any slight disagreement would be taken as disrespect. She came down hard on our appearances, our habits, things we liked, criticizing every part of our lives. I began to be relieved. When it came time to go to my mom's house, since it meant I could escape her, we tried really hard to make it work with her. We did everything we possibly could to make it better. But after several incidents, including a disastrous 4th of July, and sending me a string of verbally abusive text messages, my dad kicked her out and decided to divorce her. Sorry for the long backstory. Now we finally get to the revenge. Knowing that Gothel would try to screw my dad over in the divorce proceedings, my dad got a good lawyer and began allocating his funds strategically, so she would get less in the settlement that she would get otherwise. Just to be petty, she dragged her feet and made the proceedings take longer. Court dates got pushed back because she didn't show up. Suddenly, Gothel's father died, and they reached a settlement much more quickly after that. My dad went to the funeral, which definitely endeared him to the family more. But the final revenge, and the reason I'm writing this post, happened just a few days ago. Remember how I said Gothel was verbally abusive? Well, she didn't just attack me and my dad. She messaged a lot of people. My sister, my aunts and uncles, my grandparents, pretty much everyone she'd met in our family. She would directly message them and put up long rants on social media about how awful we were. She did it throughout the entirety of the divorce proceedings and after. Fast forward to 3 days ago. My dad comes home with a big grin on his face, saying I've got something you need to see. He shows me a letter written by the CEO of the company that Gothel works for, letting his suppliers and business partners know that Gothel has been let go as the Midwest Regional Sales Director for the company for online slander of not just the company, but of her coworkers, superiors, and the CEO himself. If they're to receive any contact from Gothel, they should ignore it and contact the CEO immediately. Gothel has worked for this company and in her industry for decades. It's pretty much the only thing she knows how to do. By attacking her company online, she's committed professional suicide and ensured that she will most likely never get a job in her field ever again. So long, Gothel. Karma's a bee and so are you. The last story is abused by a coworker and bosses tell me to take it or get fired. I recently had left a job that made me move across the country for work before being told I was only needed for one job, before getting a severe pay cut. I was running low on cash and rent in the city I was in super high. I would constantly scour Facebook, LinkedIn, and a bunch of different job sites to find at least something that was in my skill set, which was very specific, and it's hard to find anyone with a decent amount of experience. Finally found a job at a company which this post is about. They brought me on to make an extension to a specific software they were making. Alright, fair enough. Now that I look back, there were a few red flags regarding the company. They were a startup with no HR. This is important later, which is always trouble when you have a bunch of programmers since they're book smart, but usually make charisma and wisdom a dump stat. The other issue is that I never got to meet anyone outside of the CTO of the company. Lastly, the CEO and COO of the company both stated that you need to have a thick skin to be a part of the team. I foolishly thought that this meant I needed to be able to take constructive criticism. Oh, how wrong I was. First 2 weeks went fine. Our team worked fully remote, so voice chat was usually kept to a minimum. For this next part, the role of A will be taken by Greg, not real name. Greg was a senior on the main project I was working with, and was without a doubt one of the best programmers I've ever met. Apparently, he was known for getting into fights, being openly insubordinate, and would constantly bash other coworkers for their SH work. Although his work was always great, the amount of SH he would spew on everyone and everything caused an almost immediate grinding against my normally somewhat passive attitude. Usually, I was just able to ignore him and just focus on my own stuff, but after 2 weeks I had to work with him constantly for a critical piece of the project. The abuse from this guy started almost immediately. He would complain about my code, would call me and other team members incompetent, as well as constantly complain about the direction of the company. This continued for 3 months non-stop. Eventually, this came to a head when I eventually had to rope in the CEO and COO for an emergency meeting to try to get him to stop, after a particularly bad chewing out for my UX design, on a part of the extension. That sent my blood pressure and stress through the roof, and left me useless the rest of the day. I had collected statements from other team members, screenshot messages, and even recorded some conversations where he was especially severe in his verbal abuse. To my surprise, both the CEO and COO already had complaints against him. They relented and told me they know his attitude is horrendous, and that what he was doing was unacceptable. Here's how the next part of the conversation went down. CEO: we know Greg has been acting inappropriately ever since he started with us, but his code is what keeps his company going. What would you do in my position? Me: I would let him go. He's constantly causing issues with the team and making everyone frustrated. It makes things very hard to get done. CEO: I understand that, but unfortunately we aren't in a position to always hire nice people. Me: there's a difference between not being nice and bullying people. CEO: if I have to decide whether to hire a smart person or a nice person, I have to choose the smart person. He made his position loud and clear. If I wasn't going to roll over to Greg, then I'd have to find a new job. I had no HR to go to, and so there was nothing I could feasibly do to report either the CEO or Greg for this. After that, my work ethic plummeted. I said to myself that if they wouldn't care for me, then I wouldn't care about them. I clocked in at 10 and clocked out at 4. I took long lunches. Some days I just straight up didn't work and watch YouTube or play games. I was still going to make them what they asked, because I still had professional development to think about, but I was no longer going to put in more than I had to. The icing on the cake was extending the deadline of my project by 2 months, extending my employment. I got laid off due to the recession, but it was clear that they didn't like that I couldn't be pushed around anymore. A week later, I found a job much better than my previous one. I want to make an important note here to all new bosses or people with hiring power. If someone is an A on your team, then they will bring down the rest of the team. No matter how good they are, they cannot offset the drag they cause to the team. I hope you love these stories. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for the support.